Welcome, chess friends. Recently, I discovered a new chess training program called Real Chess Training by Noël Studer. And I have to say, I really love it, and I'm kind of addicted, and I hope you try it too, because it's kind of unique. So what is it all about? Every Monday, you receive an email with a test consisting of 6 positions. You spend 45 minutes analyzing, and then there's a solution video. And it is built for players 1500 to 2000, chess.com rapid, FIDE, or 1700 to 2000 Lichess. And what is the cost? Monthly, it's $25. Each year, it's about $200. So when you calculate it, this equates to about $6 for 80 minutes of training by a grandmaster with curated analysis positions and with a solution video. So let's get into it. So every Monday you receive an email, and here you see an example. It's a PDF from last Monday, 6 positions with the indication who is to play. And then you're going to spend 45 minutes finding your way through these positions. Then, after you've done this, you can watch a video, which is also included as a link in the email.
Difficult lines to calculate in this test. What I really want you to focus on.
And Noël is taking you through each positions in about 35 minutes. So really fascinating to do this yourself and then to compare notes with the grandmaster. When you think about this, right, there are 2 elements. The first thing is that you develop a chess skill, the analysis and calculation chess skill. And the second thing is that you learn to do that in a time-constrained format. So you have 45 minutes for 6 positions. So in that sense, it reflects a real game situation. So which skill, which process does Noël Studer use for analysis and calculation? So he calls it tips. Threats, look at your opponent's threats. I for ideas, look at tactical opportunities. P for plans, think strategically, follow your intuition, find a good enough move. And S for safety, perform a blunder check to avoid any huge blunders from happening. So with this program, right, you learn to implement this process and to develop your skill based on tips. And his idea is to keep it simple and to highlight the most important elements. Of course, I have been recording myself, learned to analyze videos, and I'm using for that the process of the step method, the search and solving strategy, and I augmented that based on the book Think Like a Super GM by Michael Adams. In that book, there are 40 positions, and those 40 positions are being solved by amateurs. So it goes all the way from unrated players to super GMs at the end, and then they compare what the difference is in the thought process. And I included that in my, so I updated the search and solving strategy, and the steps are orientation, what has changed, what does my opponent want to do, what are the position characteristics, dynamic, so more the tactical and forcing lines, then static, positional, and in the step method, this is all about activity and vulnerability in the position. Then calculation, visualization, and evaluation, You establish a goal, you find moves that fit with the goal. And there are all kind of mini concepts I will explain later. On the positional side, it's of course related again to activity or vulnerabilities. And then you verify. How will the position change after I play my final candidate move? And did I consider the strongest reply of my opponent? And what I notice with my students, when you are more complete in your orientation, you see more in terms of candidate moves and also tactics that follow. And also just to highlight, in the orientation, you're looking at the left side, so unprotected pieces, vulnerable king, pieces with limited mobility, and I will show you an example. And then later on, you get to the tactical themes which are related to the orientation elements. But if you stay here on this side, then you see more tactical themes. So if we compare it to tips, right? So tips, threats, right? Threats, what does my opponent want to do is a threat. I extended a little bit with what has changed. So the idea is that your opponent makes a move and the dynamics, the cooperation between the pieces has changed. And of course, suddenly it might be that two pieces are on one line, or that the king position might have been weakened. So there are more things than just threats of your opponent. Then what are the position characteristics? So he combines kind of ideas, right? The dynamic tactical possibilities in the position. But it flows already a little bit from orientation into, you could say, the calculation part. And I try to deliberately separate them because you see more if you step back and extend your orientation. Then you establish the goal, you find moves that fit, and then, of course, right, increase activity, exploit vulnerabilities. That is more the P from the planning side, and that also corresponds with the static side of the orientation. And then he has the safety check, which is focused on a blunder check, like immediate threats of the opponent, like checks and captures and loose pieces. So let's go to a position and then let's just see how it works in practice, right? So here we have a position, and this is from one of the puzzles that he shared on a Monday, and it is black to move. Right, and if you do the orientation, right, there are many things going on. Of course, the dominant thing is that there is here an immediate mating threat, and that is the main thing. But there are more things, right? When you look at this position, the two rooks are undefended. There is actually a pin here, right? So that's what's going on. This queen has limited mobility, right? If you look at it as no square, so if we can attack it, we might trap it. And then you could say that this knight and this rook are on one line. And then, so that's another characteristic. Of course, what does the opponent want to do? Mate in one. So that's the immediate threat. But there are more characteristics which are very important, like the pin, the vulnerability of the queen, the undefended pieces. And we will see how that flows through. So in this position, right, then you could say, okay, the goal is to prevent mate. And what would be the mini concept in the step method? It's very simple. In the step method, I use the acronym for defending called PC-MIC. So you can protect, you can capture, you can move away, interpose, or counterattack. So in this case, right? When we look at this position, and you think about those different ways of defending, protect would be queen g8. And then we can move away. King g8 doesn't really make sense because of queen takes h7. We cannot capture any of the attackers. And we don't have time for a counterattack because we don't have any checks besides rook c1, but that's a one-trick pony. So that leaves us with interposing. And so what are the ways to interpose? f5, g6, and h6 are the ones that come to mind. And for a lot of players, they would say, okay, I had this characteristic that this queen has limited mobility, is very vulnerable, almost trapped. If I can attack it and at the same time prevent mate, I have 2 for the price of 1, right? So when you look at the candidate moves, they flow from this PC might. And queen g8 for a lot of club players would be not a natural move. But in this case, you would say, okay, it protects, but I also get out of the spin of this pawn on e5. So it has like deactivates the queen, which is unnatural, but it has also a slight benefit that you're out of the pin. So in this position, right, a lot of players look at f5 as the first candidate move because it's very attractive to trap the queen. And then they think like, okay, what can white do? And they say, oh, I see a counterattack with knight g5. And then they calculate, right, if I take here, then they take on e6. And the 2 rooks are under attack, but I can play queen g6. And then I have a winning. So they are looking at this line. And they conclude that this is a winning position for black. Of course, right, and then we get to the verification step. So after f5, right, white, we have to do a blunder check, also and the safety check in the system of Noël. And there's this rook takes h7, king takes h7, and now knight g5 or queen h4. And queen h4, now we see that the importance that this rook is undefended because it's a double attack. So f5 doesn't work. So in the end, right, you would come to this position and then you would say, okay, let me, for instance, right, play h6. Then you have to think like, again, verify what is the best move by the opponent. And you can evaluate exploring the pin, right? So this was a characteristic leading to a candidate move of the opponent. Or, for instance, rook d1, also based on the characteristics that these 2 pieces are on one line and trying to win the knight on d3, and the analysis goes from here. So this is kind of how it then works with what I was trying to explain. The search and solving strategy, the orientation, the calculation, visualization, evaluation, and finally the verification. And I kind of try to explain that if you are complete in the orientation, you see more technical ideas like knight d4 or queen h4 with a double attack on the undefended rook. And you see more later on in the process. All right, so let's look now at another example. And I just want to highlight, because I'm talking about this process of analysis. So in this case, right, this is from step 3. And this is a mini plan step 3. And the idea here is for black to play rook e8 and to start the attack. And I'm not going into details, but I just want to show one thing in terms of verification, right? So when I was recording a video here, I had a viewer from Russia saying, in this position, I would immediately play bishop takes f2, right? And then after queen takes f2, knight g4, with the idea, right, capture, rook takes, and with a double attack at the end, and black is winning. Right, so why would I play rook e8, right? That's like not necessary at all, because I have a tactical blow in the starting position. So if you verify, right, and which is kind of interesting, is that there is a hole in this line, which is not easy to find, right? So if you go here, right, in the step method, you learn to be aware of when you defend, how much did your, what's the material balance, and can I reinvest in defending my position? And then if you think about interposing, so you say, can I reinvest in the defense here? You get to the move bishop f4, right? Because then white can escape. And why am I mentioning this? Because if you think about verification, this is not a move like a blunder check, but this is like finding a defense that is easy to overlook. And it also has to do is that it's not a safe move, because this bishop can immediately be taken. So it is, you could say, the verification sometimes includes different types of moves than just a blunder check. So the question is, how simple do you want to keep it, right? So the next example here, this is from Think Like a Super GM, black is to move, right? And players, they find out that they have to play rook takes f3, and then they continue with queen e3, check, bishop f2, bring the guard, and on the next move, black is going to mate with queen g2. And then they said, I solved the puzzle, right? So if you look, of course, to this puzzle, after rook f3, white is not forced to take and can play queen d2, bringing a defender and trying to exchange the most important attacker from black. Again, when you think about verification, right? This is not like a blunder check, but a very important, you could say, idea. And so in general, when you look at club players, I think there's a bias, right? The first bias is that they tend to look at safe moves. So that's why bishop f4 in the previous example would be overlooked. They tend to look at, right, in this case, they often assume that the opponent will take back. So they're looking at forcing moves. There's a bias towards forcing moves. And the third one is actually that they are looking at, when you look at defending from your opponent and you have a combination, the letter that is most overlooked is the counterattack, right? So in this case, this is from this week, we have knight f5, right? With the idea that if black takes on d1, we have knight e7, and then we win the queen because the king has to go to a square where it can be checked. So queen f6 to defend the rook. Now take, bishop c7, and then a lot of white players would say, okay, and I'm right, I win the rook, and that is it. So again, if you would verify, and it would not be easy to find here, you can find the move rook e6. And this would be a form of counterattack. And we see also a second part to this, that is, how do you evaluate this position when there is a material imbalance in the position, which is very difficult for club players in general. So when you think about this process and you think about tips versus the search and solving strategy, right? There are, in every step, you could say, difficulties. We saw in verification that the difficulties for club players are that they, for instance, have a bias for safe moves and for safe moves. And that's one, and that they look at forcing moves. They assume that their opponent will take back. And also that they overlook a counterattack, because it might be a bias there too. When you look at the calculation, visualization, and evaluation, many club players have difficulty with positions where there's a material imbalance. And so the evaluation is a subject at itself, right? And sometimes you cannot evaluate yet because you have to go deeper in a position. So there's also the question, when do you stop? At which depth do you stop your analysis? And with visualization, for some players, it becomes foggy after a while, or they miss how the dynamics between the pieces change further deeper into the variation. So there are different elements that play a role here. So when I look at the whole method that we were discussing, I have to say, right, I love the exercises. I love the whole concept. And every Monday, I'm looking forward to getting them. So please subscribe. Think about which process you want to learn to hone your analysis and calculation skills, and whether for you tips is sufficient because you want to keep it simple. Threats, ideas, plans, safety. So you focus on that and you follow those steps along in the video of Noël Studer, or that you say, well, I want to extend it a bit, and I showed you my process. For some players, they might say that's too extensive, I won't have any time left, I have to keep it simple. So select your process that will build your calculation and analysis skill, and that you can standardize for yourself for critical positions. Finally, I want to mention what I found very difficult myself in recording videos is gauging the difficulty of positions. And so every week we get 6 positions, and I'm a national master and a candidate, a FIDE candidate master. So my rating has been FIDE over 2200. 10 years ago it was 2270 USCF. So those were my peak ratings. I'm now over 60, so I declined. Online, I'm between 23 and 2400. When I'm doing these puzzles, I notice that I'm about 4 out of 6, and I'm making a real effort. So if I currently, my real strengths would be between 2000 and 2100, right? Because I came down now that I'm over 60. Be aware that these exercises are challenging. At the same time, right? This is not about the solution and getting it right. This is about learning the process and the skill. So that shouldn't hold you back in subscribing, but it's just a warning that sometimes the exercises are quite difficult. Noël wrote me that these positions are from games from his students or from his own games or from the games of his partner. So they have been kind of course, calibrated, but I warn you that they are still, at least for me, pretty tough. And like I said, I'm a national master, FIDE candidate master, between 23 and 2400 on chess.com and Lichess, so you know what to expect. I hope you found this useful. 6 exercises each Monday, $20 a month. $200 for a full year, 80 minutes of training by a grandmaster based on real-life examples, and learning you the most important skill in chess, which is to analyze positions. Thank you for your attention, and I hope you subscribe to my channel. Bye.